Hi there guys, got a video here for you today on the AGT Uragan 2, and in this one what we're going to be doing is a full rebuild of the rifle. Now as this is probably going to be the last video on the Uragan 2 on the channel, what we'll also do is give you a before and an after photograph of the rifle to showcase all the mods that we've done, and I'll also give you my final thoughts on it, as well as just a good general overview of the rifle, having owned it for a couple months now. So we'll start the rebuild with the front block and the regulator. We will annotate the actual O-ring sizes on screen throughout the video, so if you actually need a specific O-ring, you're going to know exactly what O-ring you'll need. The first thing we'll do is take a look at the reg piston, and I'll show you the Belleville stack. So here we have it here. The Belleville washers are cupped in pairs, with the first two being cupped down towards the base of the piston, like so, and then the rest of the pairs alternating. So there that is there. We'll add a small amount of silicone grease to both these O-rings here. And the Belleville washers have been given a little dusting of dry lube, although I've done that off camera just to keep everything nice and clean for the camera. With a little bit of silicone grease on the O-rings, the piston can be pushed into the body of the regulator like so. Then we can add the snap ring to the base, and that's simply done by using a pair of snap ring pliers, like so. Make sure the snap ring's in the groove, which this one is, and then we can reinstall the adjuster screw in the front here. So, as always, bit of silicone grease around the O-ring, and then we can get this installed. In the disassembly video, we did take the measurement from the top of the adjuster screw down to the face of the reg body, so we're going to reset the adjuster screw to the measurement we took earlier. In my regulator, the distance from this shoulder on the reg body to the top of the adjuster screw was around 27.4mm, so we're going to try and get nice and close to that measurement there, so 27.4mm, and that, on my regulator at least, put the reg to around 98 bar. So once we're happy with the adjustment, we'll take a 17mm spanner and a 10mm spanner and just tighten up the lock nut in the top there. So there's the regulator all set and ready to be reinstalled into the rifle. To do that, we'll just take a small amount of silicone grease and put it around these two O-rings here, wiping off the excess with our fingers. And we can upend the reg body, or the body of the rifle I should say, and reinstall the regulator. Like so. With that done, we can put the cap back on the front, and that's got an O-ring around it here. Screw it in by hand, then we'll do it up with the same set of snap ring pliers. And then getting that done up nice and tight with the snap ring pliers, as you saw there. Next thing we'll do is bring back the trigger and get that assembled. So the first thing we'll do is install the trigger blade. That hooks in just like so. Then we can drop the pin in from the top whilst lining those holes up. So there we have it there, that's the trigger. And we can get that reinstalled back into the block, quite simply by dropping it in the base here, getting it all lined up and pushing it in nice and gently. With that done, we can upend the block and install this securing screw into the base here using a T10 Torx bit. Next we can install the little safety screws on either side. Now I'm going to be changing the standard red ones into some gold ones, just to make the rifle look a little different, so we're going to be putting gold ones in. To do that, we'll get this safety spring aligned like so, then drop our screws in, and do them up using a 2mm Allen key, one in either side. If you did want to change the colours of your ones, they are available on places like eBay. All they are is anodised M3x8 countersunk screws. You can get them in all different colours. Next up, we'll install the safety bar, and to do that, we'll just come in from this side, drop the safety bar through, flip it over, and reinstall the blade on the other side using a T10 Torx bit. There we have it like so. Next up, I'm going to install the bottle adapter, this piece here. So this is an FX part and just screws straight into the front of the block and allows us to have a removable bottle. Obviously you don't have to do this mod, but this one I did. So that just screws in the front there Then we'll get that done up nice and tight using an adjustable spanner. There we have it there. That's pretty much it for this block. We'll put it to one side and start work on the other one. So making a start on the back block, the first thing we're going to do is install this little cover piece which goes in this hole here. It does have an O-ring on the back of it there, so hopefully you can see that. So we are just going to add a small amount of silicone grease to it, wiping off the excess with our fingers, and we can do that in using a 4mm Allen key. With that done, we can get the pellet probe installed, which is this piece here, and we're going to add a small amount of lithium grease to the outside of it, just so it runs nice and freely within the block. Just a small amount there. You get that dropped in through the back, pushed in, and then we've got to align the hole in the side with the hole in the block, so this part here. There. Then we can take this grub screw here with the little dog point on it and get that screwed in using a 2mm Allen key. Needs to be installed far enough so that the pellet probe goes backwards and forwards nice and freely within the block. So there it has there. With that done, we can install this piece here which connects the pellet probe to the cocking linkage. So we'll drop that on there like so, and then get that done up nice and tightly with a T20 Torx bit. So there we have it in the back there. There's a screw nicely installed. We can then take this back cap here and install that into the back of the block and get that done up again using a 4mm Allen key. Next up, we'll get the ball detent in the side installed. So first thing we'll do is take our ball bearing here, add a small amount of lithium grease to it, drop that in the hole like so, then take our piece of sprung steel with the fixing in the side, drop that over the hole like that, and get that done up using a T10 Torx bit. What that does is just provide a little bit of resistance for the pellet probe, so as you open the bolt, the pellet probe doesn't always want to fall forward, and that's just a little bit of assistance for when you go to install your magazine. Next up, we can reinstall the valve. So the first thing we'll do is take our valve return spring and drop it into this piece here, so the valve housing. Next thing we'll do is take the valve itself and just add a small amount of silicone grease to these two O-rings here. So a very small amount will do ya, wiping the excess off with our hands obviously. Next we can drop the valve into this hole here, obviously pin first. Just get that aligned like so. Then we can add our valve housing, small amount of silicone grease around this O-ring here, and then get that installed in the front, and then get that done up with a 5mm Allen key. So for now we're going to do this part until it touches, although we will be adjusting that very shortly. Next we'll get the boss for the plenum installed, so this piece here. This does have an O-ring on this side which we're going to add a small amount of silicone grease to as always. Get the excess wiped off. It would normally have another O-ring on this side, but as we're running the depinger we've got this taken out. So we'll get that installed in this hole here. Getting that done up with an adjustable spanner, being nice and careful not to scratch the block with the spanner itself. With that done, I'm just going to make a slight adjustment to the valve here. So we're getting a 5mm Allen key, just doing that out till it touches the boss, this piece here. You'll feel it stop, then getting it done in about a quarter of a turn. The valve housing itself, the part we just adjusted, this part here, controls two things. It controls number one, valve spring tension, and number two, valve travel. So if it's done in too far, it's going to limit valve travel and limit the amount of power that you can get. Next up, we'll reinstall the trigger, so this part here. First thing to do is to add a small amount of lithium grease to this fork section here, and also to this aluminium section up here. Just a very light smear will do you don't need to cake it in grease or anything like that. Next thing we'll do is get the trigger installed by hooking the fork round the pin into the side of the pellet probe and getting everything aligned and pushing it home. There we have it there. You see in the side there, the pin is captured, so the pallet probe moves back and forward. With that done, we can install the 2 securing screws. So one at the front here, and then another at the back. Both done up using a T10 Torx bit. Next up, we're going to install this little plastic piece here, and that just goes over this arm here and stops it from unhooking from this pin. Before it goes on, we're just going to add a small amount of grease to the back, a small amount of lithium grease, only a tiny amount, and install the bracket like so. Then we'll install the 2 securing screws using a T10 Torx bit. With that done, we can get the hammer and the hammer spring installed. So here's the hammer here. My one might look a little different from yours as I've remade it in stainless steel with a peak tip and also a PTFE guide on the back. But we'll get this part here installed outside the block as it's a little easier to do. So this is just the cocking dog, and that goes on using a T10 Torx bit. Next up, we can hook the hammer in from the side like so, and then push it into place. Next, we'll get the hammer spring installed. So here's my hammer spring with a PTFE guide and also a PTFE sleeve just to help take out some of the rattle. Get that installed in the back. Then we can take our adjuster and just get that screwed into the back like so. We'll get it into about there for now, and then we'll adjust it when we actually have the rifle built up. Whilst we're here, we will also install the little grub screw lock that goes in the bottom here. That's done using a 3mm Allen key, although we're going to leave it loose for now. To finish it off, we'll add the plastic cover piece and get the 3 securing screws installed. That's again using a T10 Torx bit. With that done, we'll get the D-pinger installed, so this piece here. This is obviously an optional piece. It's on my rifle, but it's not on the standard one. Get that pushed into the face there, get the plenum tube screwed on. With that on, we can get the 2 halves of the block joined up. So I'll bring the front half of the block in, and we'll get the plenum tube installed. With the 2 halves of the block joined, we just need to take a quick measurement between these 2 faces here. On my rifle, before I took it apart, I measured it and it was around 12 centimeters, which this is set to now. We can take a double check measurement and just take our cheek piece here, line that up with the holes on the back and on the front of the block, and make sure the cheek piece lines up and isn't getting squeezed or bent in any way. The connection between the block and the plenum does have an O-ring on it, so it doesn't need to be done up tight in order to seal. And if you take a look here, there is a gap between the block and the plenum. With that done, next thing we'll do is get the trigger linkage installed. So to do that, I'm just going to rotate one block 90 degrees from the other, take our trigger linkage like so, hook it in the little hole in the back of the block here, and then reorientate the block and get the linkage itself hooked over into the trigger. With that done, if we flip the block up, we can split the linkage between here using a flat bladed screwdriver, get it hooked into position and get the clasp where it needs to be. So that piece there, that's the trigger reconnected. And if we take a look at the front block here, this is the hole that the trigger linkage needs to go through. Next thing we'll do is install the linkage assembly. So first thing, we'll write the block. Then, taking the cocking arm, we can add a small amount of lithium grease to the top and the bottom of the pivot position. Again, just a small amount will do us, so we'll wipe off the excess with our fingers. Next thing to do is to add the spacer ring to the top of the linkage just here. This part here. Just in the top there. Next thing we'll do is install the arm into the side of the rifle, and then secure that using this little pin piece here. Doing that up with a 2mm Allen key. But once we're happy, we'll take our locking grub screw, this one here, and get that installed over the top using a 2mm Allen key. Next up, we'll take this cocking block here and get that installed on the top and align the cocking arm with the side of it. Then we can get the screw installed in the side, so this screw here with a little securing washer on the bottom of it. We'll get that all lined up and get the screw done up with a T20 Torx bit. And then we can do the same thing on the other side with the cover piece. Same screw and lock washer. Rock the block over, and we can use a T20 Torx bit to get the screw installed. And then we'll take our cocking linkage, this rod here, and get that fed through the block. In the back there, like so. Next thing we can do is get this linkage set into rough position. So first thing we're going to do is screw the back portion of it into this little block here. So I already left the grub screw in the back of this piece here installed, so it screws up into a stop. We're then going to take a look at the front of the rod here and get the dimple that's in the top of the rod aligned with the top, so there. Next thing we'll do is take this grub screw out here, pull the rod back, and then re-secure the grub screw with the dimple in the top. So this is only a rough set, we are going to install the barrel and set it properly. So we'll get that done now. As we install the barrel, we're just going to add this little buffer O-ring to the front of the block here, hooking it over the barrel as the barrel goes through. With the barrel installed, we can have a look at the back here and get the face of the barrel flush with the back of the block here. Then we can get the grub screws installed in the sides here to secure the barrel in place. And with the cocking arm open, we can install the magazine into the back and make sure we can get it in. If you can't install the magazine, the barrel itself may be too far back, then you just need to adjust it forward slightly. But we can get a magazine in, and if we look at the face of the barrel, it's nice and flush with the block itself. So we can go ahead and do these screws up nice and tight. That's done using a 3mm Allen key. With the screws in the back done up nicely, we can move along to the screws in the front. Again, installing these grub screws here using a 3mm Allen key. We'll get them all installed first, then we'll align the two blocks and then finally do the screws up nice and tight. So with the screws done up so that they're touching the barrel, I'm just going to take the rifle itself over to a nice flat surface and make sure the two blocks are in line. Right, and bringing the block back, I'm happy that the two blocks are nice and in line. I've checked it visually and against a nice flat surface, so we can go ahead and do the grub screws up nice and tight. Now that that's done, we can reset the cocking linkage length, so the length between these two pieces here. What we'll do first is just loosen this grub screw at the front. Then taking our tape measure from this surface here all the way to the front. Now on my rifle, before I took it apart, it was around 31 centimeters. So on this particular rifle from the factory it was set to 31 centimeters, and I'm happy we've reset it to that position. With the grub screw in the front done up, we can take a standard Allen key, get in the back here and tighten the grub screw in the back. This is just a locking grub screw, done up so that the rod itself doesn't come loose, or as an added protection against the rod coming loose. And if we take a look at it, it's just that grub screw in the back of that black piece there. Next up, we can put the top rail on, this piece here. It drops on the top there, then we can do the two screws up using a 3mm Allen key. Before we do them up tight, we're just going to take a feel with our fingers and just get the top rail aligned with the block and make sure it's not cocked off to one side. Once we're happy, we can do the screws up nice and tight. With that done, we'll get the cheek piece installed. Get it pushed over the front there. Get pushed down into position, and then we'll get the securing screws installed using a T10 Torx bit. With that done, we'll get the gauge installed in the side here, and that's this piece here. It does have an O-ring on the base, which we're going to put a small amount of silicone grease on before we install it. And then just to finish the gauge off, I'm going to put a little gauge cover over it. Next up, we'll put the trigger cover over. So there's a long screw that goes in the back, and then a shorter one which goes in the front. Both of which are done up using a T10 Torx bit. Next up, we'll put the aluminium bottle cover on and the Picatinny rail. Get it hooked over like so, and then get the two screws done up in the side using a 4mm Allen key. With that done, we'll get the carbon fibre shroud installed. Screws on like so. Next up, I'm going to put my little carbon fibre cocking handle on. That just screws in there like so. And we can do that up using a 5mm Allen key. Next up, we'll add the bottle. So I've got the removable bottle adapter fitted to my rifle, and as soon as we screw it in, the rifle will be pressurised. Although if you've got the standard bottle, all you need to do is screw it in, then fill the rifle up. Right then, with that all done, we can now set the power. So the power is set in the back here, so this is the hammer spring adjuster. We adjust that using a 5mm Allen key. So I'll get the power adjusted off camera nice and quickly. Right then, so I've got the rifle power set. The hammer spring adjuster at the back here is pretty much flush with the back of the block. Next thing we can do is add our little dust cap in the face here, and then we can add our stock. So we'll drop our stock on from the top, getting it aligned nicely. Can drop this long bolt in from the front and get that done up using a 5mm Allen key, although we won't be doing it up tight just yet. Before that gets done up tight, we need to install the two securing screws in the sides, getting them aligned with the block. That's done using a 2.5mm Allen key. And then finally we can come back in the base of the grip here and just get this screw done up nice and tightly with a 5mm Allen key. Right then, and that's the rifle fully rebuilt and ready for testing. So what I'll do is I'll get the rifle tested over the weekend, and then to finish out the video, I'll give you my final thoughts on the rifle, as well as giving you a little before and after so you can see what we've done to the rifle. Right then, here we are back, and the rifle has been tested over the weekend, and I'm happy to say it performed absolutely fantastically. I'll show you some of the groups we've done very shortly. The first thing I wanted to show off though is the case. So the Uragan 2 does come in its own little soft padded case, although I always like to put my rifles in hard cases as it just protects them better, plus it's easier to store them. So this is an impact sized case, and what we done on the inside was we cut some shadow foam to suit their rifle. The top layer of this foam is red, and then if you look on the side here, the sort of underneath of it's black. So if we take the rifle out of the case, you can see the cutout that's left behind, and it matches nice and closely with the rifle itself. I've also cut out some little spaces up here for the fill port and also the magazines, just to keep everything nice and secure. I'm quite happy with how the shadow foam itself turned out. We're definitely doing more cases like this in the future. This was only really a trial run, but I think it came out pretty well for a first attempt. Right then, so we'll put this to one side and I'll give you a little overview of the rifle. This is probably going to be the last time you see the Uragan 2 on the channel, So I thought we'd do a little wrap up of it and just give you my final thoughts on the rifle. So if I'm honest, the Uragan 2 was really surprising straight out the box. This is exactly the type of experience you want to receive from a high-end PCP air rifle. Straight out the box, it was nice and accurate, very consistent, and nice and efficient on air. So they're the big three things that you want, and that tells us that the rifle itself is set up very well for sub-12 use. And we haven't actually had to do any sort of accuracy mods or anything like that on the rifle. The barrel's still untouched, the regulator has just been rebuilt. The only mods that we've done to the rifle are sort of quality of life improvements, such as a nice quiet shroud, a depinger to get rid of some of the noise in your ear, and then just some hammer spring guards in the back to quieten down the action noise. And we've also put a removable bottle on the rifle, which is just a very nice feature to have, especially if you want to just work on something or swap out an O-ring nice and quickly. And apart from a few cosmetic upgrades such as the cocking handle, the little screws in the side and the new dust cover for the fill port, the rifle is a real good looking rifle straight out of the box, especially with the carbon fibre stock. The only real problem with the rifle straight out of the box was the excessive amounts of ping coming from the plenum. Although it was a fairly simple fix, and I have heard from other people that it's either not bothered them, or that some rifles don't have the ping at all. The only other thing that bothered me slightly is the sort of short stock that the rifle has. It's fairly compact, and I'm a fairly big person, so the actual length of pull was a little short for me. But if I'm honest, I have that problem with pretty much 80% of rifles on the market. I will say though that the grip position and the grip thickness and overall size is absolutely perfect. This is probably the first rifle straight out of the box where I've not had to complain about the grip position or the grip thickness, and overall handling the stock is really quite good. Right then, so I'll give you a look at the other side and then we'll take a look at some groups. So this is the new gauge cover we've made, but pretty much everything on this side is pretty much factory. Last thing we'll do is take a quick look at the groups this rifle was able to achieve. So you have to ignore the top two there as they were my zeroing and my pellet setting, but these three rows here, very tight groups indeed. So if we take a look at the bottom row here and these two groups, this one and this one, probably the tightest two of the day, and the edge to edge grouping, so I would say around 10.5 millimeters. So that'd be a 6mm center to center group, and then and this one probably the same or a little higher, so maybe a 6.5mm center to center grouping. So really quite good from a little bullpup rifle, and you definitely can't complain about the accuracy. So that's pretty much going to do it for this one, guys. Last thing we'll do is leave you with a shot of the before and the after picture of the rifle, so you can see exactly what changed on it. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.